right. Hi, everybody. Good evening from Los Angeles. My name's Tom Graham, Avid marketing rep, and with me is Jonathan Wales. We're in his great studio here in Culver City. It's called Sonic Magic.
Thank you for having me.
So, hello. Thank you for having us. I want to apologize for a little bit of the confusion over Sonic Magic and SSI. So the teaser video that you saw on the landing page was of SSI Studios, which is about 10 miles from here, and that kind of showed the Fusion in a short form or trailer workflow, and today we're going to be exploring Fusion and Pro Tools in a feature form.
Right.
Right? That's mostly what you do.
Yeah, that's mostly what we do. Correct.
So Jonathan has worked on 200 some movies since 1998. Some of them include Saw, Meet the Parents, The Last Exorcism, very scary, and one of my favorites, Memento. So we're really excited to be here, and we're going to kind of show you a room shot of his studio right now. And again, we said it's in Culver City, and this is his A stage, but he also has several other rooms that have other equipment in them that we'll dive into as well, right?
Yes.
So let's pop around here, and you can kind of see the full room shot there. We may come back to that shot as well for those people who might tune in a bit later. So we're sitting at a dual operator System 5 and Fusion, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Cool. And I should also note that Jonathan's been a beta tester for us for several years now, and he's one of those people that really puts the feet to the fire to really make sure that the stuff is working right, and that's what sort of led you to getting involved with the Fusion in System 5, correct?
Yeah, I think we really just wanted to be able to increase the scalability of what we were doing. You know, the Icon has been a great platform, is a great platform. Once you get to a certain number of Pro Tools systems and want to really scale things up, you run into some sort of workflow issues which we can get into. So we found that, you know, the System 5 addresses a lot of those issues and gives us just that much more flexibility.
Cool. Which brings us to the other part of your new additions in the last few months is Pro Tools 10, HDX, and HD Native as well. So why don't you take us through what is involved in this room and how it's all connected together?
Okay, so basically in here we're running an HDX 2-card system, so that's 512 voice HDX system. We're running 2 HD6 systems of the normal HD, and we're running 2 Pro Tools native systems, and we're also running a media composer with the Nitrous hardware. So everything's linked together on satellite link and video satellite. So it all basically acts as one sort of giant system, if you like, and it's all being fed into the dual System 5 console, which then interfaces, you know, with the recorder and everything else. So
cool. So essentially, you're mixing and matching not only video satellite for your picture playback, the media composer, but then you have several different types of Pro Tools systems. What are you using, like, for instance, the HDX system for?
Well, in the project that I'm working on right now, we're using the HDX to play back a very large sound effects and backgrounds pre-dub session. So we're running 200 and something channels worth of intense action sound effects with everything panning. The whole thing's in 7.1. We've got, you know, channel strip plugins on everything. We've got 10, 12 revibes in the session.
That's just the sound effects?
That's just sound effects.
Okay, got it.
And we are, and more to the point, we're adding to it constantly. So as we're in the process of pre-dubbing it, they're still cutting stuff. They're cutting additional stuff. They're changing the picture because there are visual effects being brought in to the movie. So all of a sudden you'll see a new shot, the same shot, but it'll have other stuff happening. So we've built the session to be able to cope with a constant expansion of material as we go. And so that's what we're using the HDX system for. Then we're using one of the native systems as the recorder.
The stem recorder.
The stem recorder for the room. Once you're in 7.1, the stems get really wide, so the channel counts are getting up there. We're using the one of the native systems for music playback.
Okay.
We have over 100 channels of music in this movie.
Wow.
And we're using one of the HD6 systems to basically cope with dialogue and ADR, group ADR, and all those little details. And then the other HD6 system we're using as what we call a toy box system.
A toy box.
That's what we affectionately call it. What it basically is a Pro Tools system basically treated as if it was like a giant outboard rack of gear. So you set up a Pro Tools session that's basically just aux tracks, and you feed stuff into it, you get stuff back out of it, and in between you're putting different plugins on the tracks, so you can do reverbs, or you could do EQs, or...
Why don't we take a look at that? That's an interesting thing. So Jonathan also has a really great Kvm switch that is integrated into the console here, and we're going to look at this toy box. So essentially, through MADI connections, right? You have MADI interfaces on everything.
Yes, everything in the room is connected on MADI. Everything shares a common word clock and is all routed together through the console, which we'll get into in a little bit. In the toy box system here, so you'll notice that we have revibe. This is HD6, so this is revibe 1.
Okay.
Altiverbs, delays. We might have like some big bottom, we've got, what else are we running? We're running some de-essers that we're using on channel inserts. We're running FUTS boxes.
Cool.
We're running, like ML4000s and Cedar DNS. It's something we just configure for every movie. It'll be different. Some of it pretty much stays the same, but the rest of it could completely change.
So some of the ways that you feed this toy box system is through the sends on the console, correct?
Yes, we're sending reverb sends into the system from sends on the console, and we're returning back reverbs that are specific for each stem. So we're returning back a dialogue reverb, a music reverb, effects, background, Foley reverbs, but that doesn't mean there's one reverb. There might be 7 reverbs for music. They all just return through one 5.1 or 7.1 reverb return, and so on and so forth. So
now, all of these systems are synchronized together using Avid Satellite Link, correct?
Yes.
And that means you could automate changes on the toy box as well, right?
Yeah, could and do. I mean, obviously we are automating the presets. We're automating, the fine points of EQ dynamics or anything we're doing on there, and we're also automating, for instance, if we want to tweak the return level, we have the option to change the relative return level between 2 different reverbs if we want to, or we can just change the global return level at the point that it comes back into the console. So we've got like the quick fix of like just hit the global return, or you can get into a lot more detail just depending on what you want to do.
Cool. Maybe you could now pop over to the sound effects system. So this is Pro Tools 10 with an HDX 2.
Yes.
Maybe we could take a look at your session and then look at the system usage and see how you're utilizing it.
Sure. So I'm going to zoom this out and I'll kill the little plugin for a second. This is sort of a little bit of a window on this reel. It's a 18-minute reel. So at the top we have some OMF effects tracks, which are the things that we've pulled in from Picture Editorial that they really liked.
Okay.
Then we have the sort of A effects, the sort of the hard effects, the doors and stuff like that.
Primary effects, yep.
Some of the normal stuff. Then we move on to some, a little bit more intense stuff. In some cases there's some water or whatever it happens to be. We have the whooshes.
And they're all color-coded. Not only the regions, but the tracks there as well, right?
Yes, we're color coding everything. So, we keep on going down. Every one of these is an individual group of tracks. Some are wider than others, and part of the reason for that is that we want to have a consistency to the layout from reel to reel. As you can see, there's a lot of Foley movement here. We get some backgrounds, Foley props, and then some guide tracks at the bottom.
Cool.
And the color coding is actually very useful, because then it transfers across to the console. So if we look at, for instance, the Pro Tools A group, it's red in here, and it also then comes up red on the console, which obviously becomes an extremely useful addition.
So again, when you're using the console, you're not only using it as a DSP digital console, but you can see the red color on the Pro Tools Yukon layer, correct?
Yes. So I think this is the fundamental thing that makes this console unique and uniquely powerful. We are able to control any system in the entire room. All of these Pro Tools systems can be controlled, but we're taking the output of the systems and then feeding them into the DSP layer of the console itself. So in this case, we've got something like 400 channels worth of DSP between the two sides of the console, where we can bring outputs from Pro Tools, and that allows us then to EQ them, to put dynamics on, and to basically do the final mix in the console, but have the pre-dubs. In other words, all the premixes are running in Pro Tools all the time, which means we can go backwards into any of those premixes and do anything we want to do. It gives us multiple places at which we can change stuff without interfering with work that's already been done. And Pro Tools 10 added to that enormously by giving us clip-based gain.
Let's take a look at that if we can. So in other words, we're looking again at the HDX Pro Tools 10 system with all the sound effects in it. I think you said around 230 voices?
Yeah, something like that. This currently we're at 213. It'll be at 300 by the time we get done.
Okay, and so with the channel strip, which is EQ and dynamics on every channel, and how many reverbs did you say you had?
There are 10 in here right now.
There's 10 reverbs in here, surround reverbs, and
reverb 2s.
We're basically barely hitting the 2 cards, correct?
Yeah, we've still got another
35%,
12 DSP chips left. We're maybe using the system to 60%, but that's not really the whole story, because if you wanted to add another 200 channels, a lot of the power is right now using reverb, so you could still almost double what's in here and not be running out of power. It's not a 100% linear equation, which is cool because it works in our favor. So one of the things that we're doing now is that when you receive stuff in from an editor, and they may have done some work to do levels in automation as they have been for a while, so you'll notice that what we're doing is we're coalescing that to the clip-based gain layer.
So in other words, if they've done volume automation in the traditional sense, you're turning that into clip gain.
We are, which gives us a lot of advantages. It means, firstly, that everything's going to play back exactly the way they intended, but it's going to do that with the Pro Tools volume automation line being exactly at 0. Meaning that when we look at the faders, and these are the Pro Tools faders on the console, they're all going to be exactly in a row, meaning if we want something a little bit louder, a little bit quieter, we don't have to go into trim mode or worry about any of that stuff in order to be able to sort of tweak what they gave us. So from just a standing start, including Media Composer, I'll play the music guide as well. So everything's running, we can go straight back, we can hit go. And we should point out that we're carrying a long video that's 20 gigs of reel. So we're carrying a really pretty intense video file off the same ISIS system that the Pro Tools are playing on. We actually, at this moment in time in the facility, they're recording ADR with one of the other actors for the same movie onto the same system using the same video. They're still working on picture editorial. We're still working on sound editorial. We're not thinking about it, and this is locking up just like that.
So that's satellite linking. Everything's synchronized together, and you're driving it here from the surface. Now, you did say that some of the plugins you're using in the HDX are the new Avid channel strip. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've started to do, which we're really loving how it's working, is that we're just defaulting to putting a channel strip on everything. So as soon as we get anything going, a channel strip goes on there, because it makes Pro Tools behave much more like you're already in a mixing environment in Pro Tools.
Right.
And so the result of that, of course, is that if I bring up a channel on the console here, then there's my channel strip window. I can already just intuitively simply grab knobs and start tweaking, and I'm going to get EQ adjusting in a way that I'm familiar with, because it looks and feels exactly the same to change the channel strip in Pro Tools as it does to go and change an EQ in the console in the same way. So
okay, so just to back up again, the new Avid channel strip plugin is in fact the System 5 algorithm that you have in front of you on the digital DSP layer, right?
Yes.
So so you've got some duplication there, but it's nice to have the DSP layer have processing as well, right?
Oh yeah, because in this situation you can fine-tune individual tracks and do whatever you want, but then we're taking the individual predubs in 7.1 back into the console, at which point we are applying some lightweight dynamics. We're able to EQ them if we suddenly need to make a difference to something. I don't know, we suddenly want to make something sound much sort of more like it goes all underwater dreamy vibe, like there you go, we took an entire predub's worth out of Pro Tools and did that, and we can then send reverb from there to the toy box system, and that's then at that point we're dealing with two completely separate layers of the reverb, because the reverbs that were necessary to make the predub sound correct are already built into the predub session. Now we're bringing it back in for the final, and we can go around again on a whole other set of capabilities.
Now that's an interesting point too. Another sort of reason for the DSP and the Fusion is monitoring, especially in 7.1, all these different Pro Tools systems and your recorder, correct?
Yes, we have to make a lot of stems. We have to be able to sort of bring together all of this stuff and handle it. So having PEC Directs to control the recorder, having PEC Directs actually be truly PEC Directs. So we're listening to the bus from the console or the playback from the recorder.
Yes.
Really gives us the ability to work and know exactly what's going on. We can solo individual speakers in the room. We can solo individual channels out of a predub or anything we want to do, or listen to things off the recorder as we go. So I think that we get an enormous amount of flexibility from this, and also because we're in 7.1, if we want to hear what it sounds like in 5.1, we can just hit a button, and then you'll see we immediately adjust. The mapping of the speakers adjusts, or we can listen to it in LCRS or stereo. So we can instantly see how does something sound in a different format.
Right. And that sort of brings up a good question now. So you had an icon in this room, and you've moved it to another room, and you're still doing predubs in that virtual Pro Tools realm. And then you come to the stage, and then you start mixing and adding the toy box effects, the DSP, and at which point do you start printing sort of your mix and punching in the traditional methodology?
Well, my personal preference is to do all the work that we need to get the reel to a point that someone wants to play the entire reel top to bottom, and to do that work completely virtually without printing anything. And then usually for me, the first time that a director wants to listen to the reel from top to bottom, then we will just print it at that point. It's a good thing to do. It gives us some safety. It gives us something to refer back to, if nothing else.
Right.
If everybody's happy with it, then we're going to move on. We may make little tweaks we're going to punch in. If we need to wholesale replace entire sections, then obviously we'll just go back to working virtually and then just punch them in lock, stock and barrel, or reprint the whole thing later. One of the big advantages of having something printed, though, is that we can then take the stem sessions and assemble them into a continuous version of the movie from a very early stage. Even if we haven't even made them yet, we can make a continuous. And that means that because we record into the stems in destructive punch when we change them, then the continuous, which is referring to the same audio files, is automatically updated. So we can always go back and watch a continuous. We can see how the reel changes work from any reel to any other reel at any point. And that gives us a really good handle on how the movie is. And people want to come in the morning and watch the movie, they can come in the morning and watch the movie.
So in your facility, you mentioned you also have ADR, Foley, obviously editors, but you also have picture departments. So what's really nice is they can be working there and quickly come over, and it's all on the same shared storage network, right?
Yes, I mean, in fact, the picture department for this movie is in-house here. We have all their stuff on the same ISIS as which we are working on. So if they want to give me a reel of picture, it's as much as them telling me, here's a sequence, open this. Or they might give us a flat file version, but it'll be on their storage. It'll just be like, okay, here it is, point here, and there you go. The difference that makes to turnover is unbelievable, because it means they can, if they want to, they can just point us to something. If they get an updated visual effects shot, they can cut it into our sequence just as easily as they can cut it into theirs, and they don't need to re-output it. Or if a picture editor is in the stage and actually thinks he wants to experiment with something, I mean, we've had them dial in to make changes and then just preview them on the big screen to see whether they like them.
Right.
So it's almost like working backwards. But the flexibility is the key. And there's an overall lack of duplication of resources. We have one copy of the sound rolls. We have one copy of picture. You know, they're using the same picture in ADR, the same extremely high resolution picture in ADR that we're using in here. So we're not having to make downgraded copies and distribute copies to shoot ADR or Foley or anything else. Editorial, you know, we may make lower quality copies for editorial, but we're still able to keep the quality level very high, so people have a very good level of visibility.
Okay, cool. Let's see if we got any questions here. So that answers sort of the ISIS question that, you know, everything you're doing is playing off of ISIS.
Yeah, and I mean, the other half of the ISIS question is that it is rock solid. It's also very secure and very easy. So we're able to set up work groups that are completely specific to the show, meaning you can log into this show, but you're not going to get to see anybody else's show. Okay. It's very secure like that, which is very relevant for especially for movie studios and people who want to trust you with stuff. I mean, you know, the picture of this quality is no joke. If it walks out the door, somebody's losing a lot of money. Sure. You know, and from a speed and efficiency standpoint, what we didn't realize before we went to this extent of integration was, once there's one copy of everything, like, for instance, just on a Pro Tools level, everything's always relinked all the time. Someone can send me a copy of something, they just need to send me the session, tell me where the session is. And I can just import from it, and everything's linked because their version's done on the same network. It already knows where everything is. There's no like, oh, where are the audio? Oh, I'm missing an audio file.
There's no duplication of the media.
No duplication and no lack of knowledge of where the media is, because it just is where it always has been.
So what are the, I mean, what obviously brought you to the Fusion, System 5, Pro Tools 10, HDX? What are the challenges that you face as, you know, a sound for picture, especially feature-length studio and mixer? What are the biggest headaches you have to deal with?
Well, I think some of it is that we have to deal with a very wide range of types of projects with very wide-ranging budgets. I mean, this is a relatively high budget project. We've just gone through Sundance season, where we did 6 or 7 movies in Sundance with budgets that added together might add up to the budget of this movie. So we have a very wide range. We have a need to be able to reconfigure the room at a moment's notice and do whatever we need to do. I mean, for instance, as soon as we get out of here tonight, we have to load something up and run a delivery print master of something. and because the system is remembering not only the automation but also all the interconnections between all the Pro Tools systems, all the metering, everything that's routed in the entire room, that means that we can go from project to project with a high level of complexity very, very quickly.
Tell me about, so having mixed in the icon in the box world, how was it to transition to the Fusion and System 5?
Well, I think it was just like somebody handed you a whole bunch of new possibilities and just an additional sort of toolbox of power, as it were, and you got to sort of use it and see what you could do. I think that there is such an advantage to having a level of persistence to signal flow in the console, such an advantage to having a really big ability to rearrange signal flow within the room in a permanent basis. I mean, one of the things we can do in here now that we've never been able to do before would be to take, say, channel 3 of this Pro Tools and route it to channel 17 of that Pro Tools, and route that back to the console, and then stick something across the insert that goes out to the toy box system, all comes back, goes to the recorder. You can't do that in any normal way without and have it be recallable. Because even if you did have the money to buy a whole bunch of interfaces between the Pro Tools systems to break everything out, you'd have to then do that through analog patching or something else. You can't do stuff that flexible. So then you end up having to be constrained to what you can do inside one box, which is where the scalability issue comes. It's like when you want to involve multiple boxes, but you want there to be interconnections between them in order to make it work. And you don't want those interconnections to suffer from any to cause gain structure problems within themselves. There are no we've removed all the gain structure problems within Pro Tools through 32-bit float and all the rest of the stuff we have now in HDX and native. But as soon as you have to connect a whole bunch of different systems together, then you're starting to get into some sort of bottlenecks. And depending on what the structure of what you want to do is, that can be a problem. Potentially. It's not that you can't do it. Part of the question becomes how easily can you do it, and that's what feeds into the budget question of, well, what can you do, how long is it going to take, how predictably and how reliably can you do it, and is it going to be any good?
Got it. For the transport controls, are you using sort of Yukon or the machine control in that center section there?
Well, the System 5 talks to one of the Pro Tools systems on the chain over machine control, but only to the extent that it's issuing rewind, forward, stop, or whatever types of commands.
Okay.
Other than that, as soon as the system has been instructed to play or stop or rewind or whatever, then it's immediately up to the satellite link bus to take everything and make it all play together. So that's how that's being achieved.
Great. Let's see if we have another question for you here from... So just to clarify, the premix is happening on an icon in another room and still being kept virtual.
In fact, the answer to that is yes, sometimes, but also in this particular case, these effects premixes were done on this console in this room, but over Yukon. So in other words, I'm doing the premixing for this effects session is being done using these panners and these faders on the HDX system in this room and monitored back through the DSP layer. So we're sort of building the movie as we go. And as we finish one pre-dub, we have the next one available, and we can keep on layering it up. And then when we start adding dialogue, then we can either choose to listen or not to listen to effects, but we have everything available at every point as we go.
You mentioned earlier in the earlier webinar that one of the really nice advantages of the Fusion over Icon was that you could have DSP channels right next to a Pro Tools dialogue system, right next to channels from the Pro Tools sound effects system.
Yes, and that's true. And not just you can do that, but you can do it and remember it as many times over as you need to. So, I mean, for instance, here's a layout of channels where you can see the red ones at the end there. Those are the first sort of 8 or 9 channels worth of the effects here. Then I have effects and background masters, which are VCA masters for the Pro Tools system. Then I actually have the individual like backgrounds A, B, and C, and effects 1 through 9, each of which, so effects 1 is the result of all those red channels, and effects 2 is the result of all the blue channels, and so on and so forth.
It's the 7.1 master.
Exactly, and I can actually see that because I can spill out let's say the effects 2 master, and then I'm going to see the left, center, right, left side, left back, right back, and boom. Channels, I can make adjustments to those return channels individually, or I can make adjustments to them as a whole. And those adjustments can be both level, but they could also be that I want to apply some EQ, for instance, to those effects as a group, or dynamics. So I have pretty much unlimited resources in terms of being able to re-effect what I've already done inside Pro Tools. And interestingly, what we do here is that we have the effects 1 through 9 DSP. On top of that, in the swap player here, are the original VCAs that control the level of those individual predubs in Pro Tools. So let's say, for instance, that we've done something and we're actually finding it's a little bit loud coming into the console and we're peaking out. We can actually lower, and you'll see the faders go down that are attached to this in Pro Tools. This is affecting Pro Tools faders over here, and
then
therefore
on the swap layer is the DSP.
Exactly, and so this will affect the level going out of Pro Tools and hence the level coming into the DSP layer. So we've got gain structure control just like that, incredibly easily, and we have access, through the Yukon commands. For instance, the good old auto match. I can cancel that adjustment. Just the same as I could by hitting auto match on an icon. Now
I notice you've been going to this kind of center section here for your EQ and dynamics. Is that right?
Yes.
And that's similar to the way the D control was. It had a center section, correct?
Yeah, the System 5 has a center section for the DSP channels. And then for any channel, including Pro Tools channels, we can bring them onto the center fader here as well. So, at this point I'm affecting a Pro Tools channel, and over here I can be going over here, and now I'm affecting a DSP channel. So we can pretty much do whatever we want to do. It makes it very, very flexible. And the fact that we can pull, literally 6 faders together could be 5 different Pro Tools systems and a console fader side by side, and they don't even have to be Pro Tools because it's Yukon.
Right.
So.
Earlier you mentioned that, essentially Icon was really still the best, most integrated Pro Tools if you're mixing entirely in the box, right? And then compare this console to that environment.
Well, I think the best way of looking at it is that, like you said, like we were saying earlier, is that if what you want is the tightest integrated, just pure controller for a Pro Tools system or a couple of Pro Tools systems, then nothing beats the Icon, except for the fact that this beats the Icon hands down in ergonomics. But once you need to scale beyond using a few systems and need the ability to really start doing some intense work with multiple systems, 5, 6, 8, 10 systems, handling all the inputs from those and everything else, it really becomes extremely beneficial to add the audio routing capabilities.
The monitoring.
Exactly. The monitoring, the router itself, to be able to just interconnect everything however you feel like you need to in order to do what you need to do. The fact that we've got multiple inputs to DSP channels, so you can literally audition option A, option B as just a click of a button on an individual
with the same
channel.
EQ.
With the same EQ and everything else.
Amazing. All right, let's see if we got another question here. How do you deal with the difference in dynamic range when receiving Pro Tools 9 sessions as well, if you need to send an editor or something in Pro Tools 9 you've mixed in Pro Tools 10?
Well, if you need to send something, it depends on what has been done in it and what is specific. Obviously, if you need to send somebody a Pro Tools 9 version of one of these sessions where we've done a lot of clip-based gain, you really have to have a look at the clip-based gain, decide whether you could coalesce the clip-based gain back out to automation,
right?
Which, unless you've done extreme amounts of gain above 0, is very easy to do. I mean, the difference being that clip-based gain can go to plus 36, I think, and regular automation goes to plus 12. But honestly, you know, I mean, like in a sound effects session, we're trying to turn stuff down, not up. It starts life loud, and usually we need to control it. Obviously, look, when you're going from any Pro Tools version to any previous Pro Tools version, you're going to lose some capability.
You have to plan for that.
Yeah, as a facility, we've planned for that. All we did was put everybody on Pro Tools 10, because the benefits of Pro Tools 10 were so great. We couldn't conceive of not being able to leverage that as soon as possible.
Right.
If we have to deliver this out, though, as a Pro Tools 9 session, the capability exists to do it. For anything where we can't coalesce the clip-based gain, for instance, we could just have it render out the clip-based gain if we really needed to. I think when you're round-tripping editorial workflows, you want to make sure, like if someone's delivering to you and you're delivering back to them and so on and so forth, you want to make sure everybody's on the same version. But these effects were cut in Pro Tools 9. And we took them in, and then we just simply coalesced volume automation to clip gain and kept on working.
Excellent. All right, so here's an interesting question. It's from a post-editor mixer in New York City. It says he's never worked on such mixes that are enormous and complicated. How do you keep it all together in the mixing process with all the amount of data and systems that you have to control? It does seem a bit mind-blowing.
Well, I think it's like lots of things can be mind-blowing, and the only solution to that type of stuff is just organization. So you have to break things down into manageable sort of subunits and manageable sized chunks. So for instance, we've got 200 channels of effects, but what I've actually got here are 9 faders worth of effects, and you know, we've got another 70 tracks of backgrounds. Some of them are in this session, some of them are somewhere else. There'll be another 5 or 6 tracks of backgrounds.
So it's compartmentalizing.
Exactly. And by compartmentalizing it, then what we also do is we make sure that we can go both down and up the tree. So if I need to get back in and change something in effects A, I can go back there and there's effects A. If I need to go back into effects E, I can hit a button and there's effects E. Because all of these different layers of organization, we're sort of building them as we're going. And then at the same level, we do the same thing for dialogue. So we'll have dialogue, and we'll have principal ADR, and we'll have group ADR. And to me, in the final, it's simply dialogue, music, effects, backgrounds, group. Your final mix is still going to be 8 or 10 faders in essence. But underneath those 8 or 10 faders, you just keep diving deeper. Each one of those may represent 8 or 10 more, and each one of those may represent another 20.
And one thing to keep in mind, too, is on a feature film, you mentioned to me you have about 3 weeks of pre-dubbing, where you can just spend time on the door slams and the gunshots and the what have you, right?
This is the thing, and this is where it comes down to the flexibility. You have that if you're really lucky. I mean, we do projects where we will have that, and we do a lot more projects where we won't. We do plenty of projects where you have to pre-dub it in a week and final it in a week, But the thing is, the same rules apply. The rules are you got to approach it in a logical way. You got to lay it out in ways that make sense and
in templates
and that are familiar. And that's exactly right. I mean, the way we lay this stuff out is defined and is constant from movie to movie.
Maybe we could switch back and show your Pro Tools session again, and you could see in this session that as Jonathan scrolls down, you'll see there are tracks that are inactive. They're the gray, darker gray. So he's left those for sort of growing anything that may come in, right?
We've left them for growing, and we've left them for the other reason that we're always trying to keep these things a constant width.
Right.
So we want Pro Tools, the pre-dub A, pre-dub B, pre-dub C, and so on and so forth. We want them to take 24 faders. It can be any combination of monos and stereos. We don't really care about voices. We care about faders. And then that way, if we need to import stuff into the session later to grow it, then we already know where it's going to go. We've got places to bring it. And we can start to work out logically what to do. And if the amount we need to add starts to get stupid, then we'll add another system.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. What would be maybe your top Pro Tools tip, or maybe your favorite feature in Pro Tools 10? You have any nuggets that you really...
Apart from any of the stuff we've been talking about? I mean, honestly, my favorite thing in Pro Tools 10, hands down, is the channel strip plugin.
Interesting.
Not even thinking about it. Because it's taken Pro Tools and given it something that it's never had before, which is like a sort of default consoleness to it, a default sound, a default capability that is superly high powerful. That's really good English. but I think you know what I mean. It sounds indistinguishably as good as the console, and is easily familiar, and it just does nice stuff quickly. Moving on from there, I think obviously the big highlights for me: clip-based gain, and the disc.
It really has changed how you approach the faders now, because essentially leveling and having your editor have their own separate level. You now start with clean faders,
yeah,
right?
I get clean faders, and then once I've done what I've done on the clean faders, I get a trim pass, and once so yeah. There's much more structure now to the mixing process. Plus, the clip-based gain is pre the inserts, which means that
pre-plugins, right?
Right, which is actually very logical, because you think there are no plugins on the tracks when the editors are working. So taking something and applying it for clip-based gain, or automation-wise, won't make any difference to gain structure at that point. But boy, does it help later, because if you've got the thing playing at a sensible level before you try and stick a compressor on or whatever, it makes it a lot more sensible and a lot easier to be able to use things like channel strips without just doing squirrely gain structure. I mean, a lot of people used to put trim plugins in before you'd put any plugins in, just to try and get things under control. Well, now in these big effects sessions, that's not a problem anymore.
Yeah. And you also, I mean, obviously having the network attached storage and the disk cache has completely changed how you configure your facility.
The disk cache has changed everything, and honestly, it's changed it less in this room than it has in the rest of the facility, because this room was we were using fiber channel, we were networking stages anyway. Since we've had Pro Tools 10 and disk cache, we're now networking the whole facility. We're shooting ADR and Foley onto the ISIS system. We are able to use, for instance, IMAX now, because ISIS is an Ethernet-based system. We're able to use IMAX with Pro Tools 10. Plus, they're having, with Complete Toolkit, those guys are running the same Pro Tools HD software that we're running in here. So it's like there's not a single system in the entire building that can't do the same stuff. They just have different hardware. We can use PCs with impunity, and we do.
Cool.
It's really opened it up.
Cool. Here's a question about the clip gain. Can't you just save the automation on a playlist, coalesce it, and then use trim? I see no point in clip gain except adding gain without offline processing.
Okay, well, the question as to can't you just use trim is obviously correct, because I mean that's what we were doing for a long time. I mean we'd get stuff in from editors, and we'd stick the whole thing in trim. So that. You're not
with
wrong.
Only a certain amount of gain, though, with trim.
Right. Well, you're not wrong to say that. There are a couple of things, though. Trim under use is not as accurate as volume automation, because it can't be, because it has to calculate. It doesn't know what you're going to do on the fly, so it's not deterministic at that point. It means that while you're actually moving a trim fader, it's no longer sample accurate automation in the same way. It will be when it plays it back the next time, but it isn't while your finger is on the fader. One of the problems that sometimes tends to happen with this is that you get editors especially sound effects guys, and they have a thing, and they will have like just grabbed the automation, so it's going to have right angle automation top and bottom. I don't know if anybody's ever had this, but if you use trim automation on an icon or on this or on anything else to handle that, you can often get little clicks or little bumps at the beginnings and ends because the automation system simply can't deal with calculating on the fly what it thinks you're doing on the trim fader and applying it and remaining accurate to within that sample. Once you've made the move, you play it back, it plays perfectly if you're not touching the fader. But clip-based gain has several advantages in my opinion. One of them is obviously that you don't suffer from that problem. Another one is that it's entirely region-based. Which means if you move regions around, the clip-based gain travels with them regardless of what's going on automation-wise. Additionally, I know this is stupid, but if you look at the Pro Tools screen for a second, this for me has been a lifesaver, especially with dialogue. Clip-based gain affects the waveform in real time.
Exactly.
And
you've gotten so used to seeing that, right?
Right, and so if I know that, and obviously this isn't that, but if I knew that this was a big click in my dialogue, or let's take something that looks a little more likely, if I know this is a big click in my dialogue, and I get my act together, then I can actually take it out. There he goes. Boom. Now I've taken that thing right out of the middle of there and not really thought about it. It's just far more intuitive to be able to do some of this stuff with a clip-based gain type approach. And obviously on a gain level, if something's quiet, you've got plus 36 dBs. So I don't think the person is wrong in what they're saying in terms of the fact that we've had ways around this in the past, but that doesn't mean that this isn't a big improvement.
Well, I also think you hit it on the head earlier when you said sound effects libraries are created at maximum volume typically.
And source music.
And then you, of course, have plug-in chains that you want to use, and before you've done anything, you've got it. In the old TDM world, you'd have to go in and gain that down, or Audio Suite process. And now with clip gain, it brings it more into the realm of.
Well, and this is a combo plate between clip gain and what it means to have 32-bit float architecture. Because if you have something that's inherently very loud on your audio track to start with, in the old scenario, the idea of then being able to add 10 or 12 dBs of like bass to that would be insane, because you'd end up clipping the output of the plugin and so on and so on. You'd set yourself up for all sorts of gain structure problems. Now, there's no law that says you can't do whatever you want to do with the EQ and then just bring it down on the fader later, because you're not inherently running out of headroom in the middle. At the same time, this is silly, but when we take all these silly sound effects that are so loud in their original recordings and take the volume automation and apply it to them, all of a sudden we can see waveform we couldn't see before, because that thing used to look just completely blown out because it was too loud. And
that's
so
a very good point.
It's actually helping clean up the display, and I know that's not what it's for, but it's like you're getting all these little spin-off benefits that are starting to come out that we didn't even expect.
Cool. Great. I'm just trying to see if we have any other questions here. Someone would love to see your I/O setup.
On here?
Yeah.
On this session, it's relatively straightforward, because all we're doing is outputting a whole bunch of 7.1s. We have two MADI interfaces, so there's 128 physical outputs, and so we're outputting 9 effects, 3 backgrounds in this particular case, and a bunch of discrete OMF and some temp dialogue and music. If we swap over to the Toybox system, it's maybe a little more interesting. In the Toybox system, we have 64 ins and outs, and we really are just routing in and out of this system individually to individual different channels for plugins, different outputs. So we're setting up quite a lot of routing.
And again, the MADI interface makes that connectivity more affordable, because otherwise you'd have
It does, but the MADI is extremely good at getting a lot of channels in and out of Pro Tools, but if you are trying to connect two Pro Tools systems together, you can obviously have a MADI interface on each and you'll get 64 channels between them. But what you can't do, once you have 3 or 4 systems, you don't have the flexibility to take an individual channel of one system and connect it to an individual input of a different system. And that's really where the console adds such a massive amount of flexibility, because you have a massive cross-point router. You can take anything to anywhere, but not only once, but you can take one source and send it to 20 destinations at the same time. So that makes it much more possible to set up, for instance, different meterings, different monitoring things. You can tap things off and record them in multiple. I mean, you can do so many different things that you couldn't do before.
Great. Let me just see if we have any last questions here. How many engineers are working on your typical session, so to speak, or how many editors? And then you have a dual operator, so you have 2 mixers, correct?
We have 2 mixers, or we may have 1. Okay. I mean, I do a lot of mixing myself. We configure this stuff in such a way that you can easily use it as a single person or as 2 guys. And editorially, I mean, it really just depends. I mean, there are 8 or 10 editors working on the movie that we're working on right now. But on smaller movies, it may literally just be 2 or 3.
And are they cutting in stereo and then come to the stage in surround, or?
Well, this movie was actually cut in surround.
Okay.
They were cutting stuff with sort of surround panning and surround intentions built in, and then we would tweak it or change it depending on what we thought we liked. But interestingly, the decision to do the movie in 7.1 was made halfway through the process. So we had Pro Tools sessions that were delivered in 5.1 and then Pro Tools sessions that were delivered as 7.1. And one of the cool things is, because of the way Pro Tools works with this, is we were able to convert the 5.1 sessions to 7.1 without losing any pan targeting, because if you're going from the front right speaker to the back right speaker, by definition you go through the side, and even if you add the presence of a side speaker, the way that the transition is done in Pro Tools is so clever that it just naturally does exactly what you'd expect and just sounds cooler.
Wow.
So
I learned something new.
We had our fingers crossed for a while until we realized that was actually true.
Right on. Well, any tips on keeping these large sessions organized? I think we kind of covered that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main tip is you got to break it down into component blocks, preferably by type, but by food groups. So backgrounds you break down into like airs, birds, bugs, traffic, whatever, that, walla, those types of things. I mean, effects, you break it down into like regular hard effects like doors and stuff like that, and then maybe guns, and then ricochets, and then impacts, and then fight stuff like punches, and then maybe fire or water explosions. So each sort of category like that, and it's obviously on a movie by movie basis. I mean, nobody drives a car in this movie, for instance, but if you're in a car chase movie, it would be like skids and impacts and screeches and gear shifts noise. And engines, and exactly. So I mean, but I think the point is you've just got to get logical and work out what the component elements of it are, because what you need is at the end you've got to be able to mix the thing on a few faders. You cannot do a final mix thinking about 50 things. You've got to have effects, backgrounds, dialogue, music. That's your mix. That's what a movie is. And the goal, obviously, in pre-dubbing is to make sure that it's possible to mix it like that. And then, then if the effects balance isn't right, then you drill down and you start tweaking the relative balance. But in a final, you're really tweaking you're looking at the big picture of music, effects, dialogue, and how does it make a movie that tells a story. When picture changes, where does this lead to conforming the automation on the DSP console and the automation in Pro Tools? Well, the answer to that is yes. When picture changes, we conform those. The console automation can be changed from a change list. So you can literally just import a list and hit go and it'll be done. And Pro Tools, you can do it by hand or you can run it through something like Conformalizer. It really depends on the type of change, but there's no barrier to being able to do that. Obviously, when you have picture changes, you have different types of problems in different areas. Usually what ends up happening is most things remain the same, and then there's this one area where it's all been cut to hell and you have to fix it. And that ends up being the case whether you're in Pro Tools or not in Pro Tools. So at some point you're going to have something you're going to have to fix.
But it's doable.
You fix it, but it's perfectly doable.
Got it. All right. Boy, I sure wish I had Pro Tools 10 and this webinar this time last year. So maybe we're helping some people out just a little bit too late for some.
Yeah.
So
it's never too late.
It's never too late. So I really want to thank you for spending the time with us.
Sure.
This is great. If you don't know, these webinars will be posted afterwards. Give us a few days to post them, but they will be posted on under Avid Pro Mixing Webinars. You can do a Google search and it's the first entry. So thank you for attending worldwide. We really do appreciate it, and take care. Thanks a billion.
Thank you very much.
All right.